Good morning, friends. I welcome you all in this today's session on scope of financial services in startups. We really sincerely welcome to particularly branch, Bharatpur branch, Ganganagar branch, Jodhpur branch, and Kota branch. And my three moderators, that is Anilji, Akash, and Satinji. We are really thankful to Navratanji, Chairman of Vyawar branch, Rakesh Gupta ji, Vice Chairman of Bharatpur branch, Ashish Gupta ji of Ganganagar branch, Balbir Singh Gehlot ji from Jodhpur branch, and Lokesh Maheshwari ji, Chairman of Kota branch. Friends, we have received so many of seminar, conferences, webinars in last 1.5 years. After this COVID period, we have attended so many webinars which we have not even attended in last 5 years. That's good. But in those time, I have tried my best to come to you with the topics I feel are very, very important in present circumstances. The way things are changing, the way technology is taking place, the way government is changing their rules day and night. So my try is that I should come with my members to update their knowledge with whatever new changes are taking place in our profession. In that direction only, today's session, which we are going to have, that is scope of financial services in startups. And I'm really happy to share with you the speaker today is one of the young girl, our member only, and she is very dynamic, dealing already in this line, doing wonderful work in this line, and she's from our Alwar only. So I sincerely welcome her also for sharing her time for we members, which is very, very important topic for today. I will first like to call Chairman of Kota branch, Lokesh Maheshwari ji, to welcome our members. Over to Lokesh ji.
Thank you very much, sir. Respected CA Prakash Sharma, sir, Central Council member, Chairman and Banking and Insurance Committee. Respected CA Chandrasekhar Vasant Chitale, sir, Vice Chairman of Committee, and today's learned speaker, Advocate Harshita Kushwaji from Alwar, and all the other chairmen of the Vyawar branch, Bharatpur branch, Gangapur branch, Jodhpur branch. I thankful to our बैंकिंग कमेटी चेयरमैन सीए प्रकाश शर्मा जी, उन्होंने इतना अच्छा प्रोग्राम, क्योंकि अब धीरे धीरे जो स्टार्टअप्स हैं वो हमारे मेंबर्स के लिए भी बहुत फ्रूटफुल होते जा रहे हैं, क्योंकि जो स्टार्टअप्स है उनमें जो हमारी सर्विसेज है उसके रिगार्डिंग ये सेशन आज होने वाला है कि बहुत सारी ऐसे अनटच्ड सिनेरियो हैं जो प्रैक्टिस में हम यूज नहीं करते हैं, तो वो सारी सर्विसेज भी आज हमें यहाँ देखने को मिलेगी और इससे हमारे जो मेंबर्स को भी बेनिफिट होने वाला है। बहुत सारे मेंबर्स हमारे साथ जुड़े हुए हैं इसमें, तो मैं इसी के साथ ज्यादा समय नहीं लेते हुए वापस हैंड ओवर करता हूं प्रकाश सर।
Thank you, Lokesh ji. Thank you. I request Rakesh Gupta ji, Vice Chairman of Bharatpur branch, to please welcome our members. Over to Rakesh Gupta ji.
Respected Prakash Sharma ji, CC member. अपने स्टेशन स्पीकर श्री हर्षिता कुशवाहा जी अलवर, अपने मॉडरेटर आकाश बगोरी जी, अनिल कुमार यादव जी एवं सचिन कुमार जैन, सभी का इस मीटिंग में हार्दिक स्वागत एवं अभिनंदन। साथ में अपने ब्रांच साथी ब्रांच नटवर ओसवाल जी चेयरमैन, अभिषेक गुप्ता जी गंगानगर, बलबीर सिंह जी गहलोत और लोकेश माहेश्वरी चंद्रमा चेयरमैन कोटा ब्रांच, सभी का हार्दिक स्वागत एवं अभिनंदन करो। ओवर टू।
Thank you. Thank you, Rakesh. Well, from Byawar is available. Is Mr. Ashish Gupta from Ganganagar is available?
No, sir.
Okay. बलवीर जी तो उनका कोई कुछ घर में कुछ फंक्शन है उनके. He is not available. Now I'll request our out of these three moderators, one of the senior most moderator, Sachin Jain Saab, to share his views.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity. Our own 24/7 available for everyone. My guiding force, our Central Council member from Jaipur only, and Chairman Banking, Finance Service and Insurance Committee SIC of ICAI, K. Prakash Sharma sir. My elder brother and ever smiling personality, Chairman, Vice Chairman of this committee, T. A. Chandrasekhar Vasanji Tale sir. Crux of today's program, our Margdarshak of today's topic, person of full of energy, Shri Harshita Kushwaha ji from Alwar, my co-moderator and my younger brothers, very young and energetic, handsome personalities, Akash Bhai and past chairman Jaipur branch Anil Yadav ji, and chairman of all the hosting branches, Navratan Oswal ji from Byawar, Rakesh Gupta ji from Bharatpur, Ashish ji from Sri Ganganagar, Balveer ji from Jodhpur and Lokesh ji from Kota. All the management committee members, all the 6 branches, my friends and all other colleagues, a very good morning to all of you. Friends, as you all know, that the India's financial technologies, also known as fintech sector, may be young but is growing rapidly and fueled by a large market base and innovation-driven startup landscape and friendly government policies and regulation. Several startups populated this emerging and dynamic sector, while both traditional banking institutions and non-banking financial companies are playing catch-up. India houses around 3,200 startups at March 21, and it is growing day by day. The advent of fintech players had somehow made banks a little bit conventional in the initial years. However, banks are now joining forces with fintech startups to upgrade their existing system and enable smoother operation to deliver a better experience for consumers. Just look at some mind-boggling status. UPI was launched in 2016, and within a space of a few years, it has reached a statistical number of 2.3 billion transactions in January 2021. Nearly 295 million Jan Dhan Yojana accounts have been opened, with 176 million in rural and semi-urban areas. The opportunities these platforms offer to fintech startup to create value addition to customer is unparalleled. Combine all this with the rapid rise in the number of mobile phones and the use of digital payments, the market potential is immense. So the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning across all products are offering of fintech startups, while proliferate and will be particularly used in RegTech connected to financial services. Tracking money laundering, transaction monitoring, and prevention of cybercrime and fraud will gain increasing traction. Friends, for welcoming to this era of digital lending, I thanks Prakash for choosing this type of topic and enable really very thanks to Prakash sir for giving me this opportunity. Nothing more. Over to you, Prakash sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Sachin ji. Now I request Chairman of Jaipur branch, Anil Yadav ji, to welcome our members and share his views.
Thank you so much, sir. Respected Prakash Sharma sir, Central Council member and Chairman of Banking and Insurance Committee. First of all, sorry, actually I was on the way, so network का issue रहेगा. My co-moderator C. Sachin Kumar Jain ji, Regional Council member, Chairman of Jaipur branch Akash Badgoti ji, and all the other chairmen present here, Lokesh ji, Rakesh Gupta ji. A very good morning to all of you. Friends, financial services, scope of financial services in startup. We have our dynamic speaker, Harshita Kushwaha ji from Alwar. She will tell us what is the financial services available in startups and क्या scope है हमारे पास. मैं just जो young members हैं उनसे इतना share करना चाहूँगा. Startups पे जब हम लोग बात करते हैं, जो practice में अगर हम उसको बात करें, तो अभी हम एक, जैसे मैंने ऑफिस स्टार्ट किया तो मैं एक स्टार्टअप में एक स्पेशलाइजेशन पे, अगर प्रोप्राइटरशिप में हूं तो अब स्पेशलाइजेशन पे नहीं जाए। ऐसा ना हो कि मैं सिर्फ इनकम टैक्स का काम करूंगा या मैं सिर्फ जीएसटी का काम करूंगा या मैं सिर्फ एक ही फील्ड में जाऊंगा। अगर आपको स्टार्टअप करना है, स्टार्टिंग में अगर मैं सीए के स्टार्टअप की बात करूं, सो दैट आपको ग्रुप्स में काम करना होगा, आपका पार्टनरशिप में काम करना होगा। देयर शुड बी मिनिमम 3 पार्टनर और 4 पार्टनर, सो दैट एक इनकम टैक्स संभाल सके, एक जीएसटी संभाल सके, एक कंपनी से संभाल सके, एक आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस। आज ही न्यूज़पेपर के अंदर कि टेस्ला कंपनी ने, जो प्रकाश सर हमेशा कहते थे, हमेशा हमको समझाते रहते हैं कि आप लोग एआई के ऊपर काम करें, तो टेस्ला जो कंपनीज है उसने नए रोबोट उतारे हैं। आज ही मैं न्यूज में पढ़ रहा था, तो जो रोबोट्स हैं वो आपका जो दुकान के ऊपर काम है वो भी करेंगे, और इवन जो कार्स की जो सर्विस है वो भी अब रोबोट्स करेंगे। तो वी कैन इमेजिन कि आने वाला फ्यूचर कैसे हो सकता है। जो ऑडिटर्स हैं वो भी हो सकता है कि जो एआई है, एआई पूरा पूरा कैप्चर कर चुकी है। इवन जैसा प्रकाश सर ने बताया था कि आईसीआई भी इसी उसमें काम कर रहे हैं, सॉफ्टवेयर्स हम लोगों को प्रोवाइड करवाए जा रहे हैं ऑडिट्स के लिए। सो प्लान अकॉर्डिंगली हमें कैसे काम करना है। स्टार्टअप पे भी हम लोग काम कर रहे हैं, शुरू में भी अगर हम सीए बिजनेस, सीए प्रैक्टिस के अंदर भी आ रहे हैं, तो इसी तरह से आप लोग प्लान करें कि अब आप, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि मैं आपके पास, आपने कहा सर सॉरी सर मैं का रजिस्ट्रेशन नहीं करता हूं या मैं ये नहीं, काम हमें सब करना है, बट एक जने को, एक पार्टनर को स्पेशलाइज होना पड़ेगा, स्पेशलाइजेशन फील्ड अपनाना पड़ेगा स्टार्टअप होते हुए। तो वो जब तक हमारी नेटवर्किंग नहीं होगी, इट्स नॉट पॉसिबल। तो बस ज्यादा नहीं लूंगा मैं टाइम, बाकी मैम बताएंगी। और थैंक्स प्रकाश सर। प्रकाश सर के जो भी टॉपिक्स होते हैं हमेशा यूनिक टॉपिक्स होते हैं, हार्ड टॉपिक से हटके होते हैं, हमेशा मेंबर्स के लिए इतना सोचना है। थैंक यू सो मच सर। नाउ इट्स ऑन यू।
Thank you, Anil ji. Now I'll request our young and dynamic chairman of Jaipur branch, Akash Bhagwati ji, to share his views.
Thank you, Prakash sir. Respected our own CCM, Prakash Sharma sir. Respected my moderators in team, Anil Yadav ji and Sachin ji, regional council member, and the other hosting branches. I welcome all the chairmen of the hosting branches, and also I welcome Harshita ma'am from Alwar, but I think she's practicing in Delhi right now. So a very warm welcome to all. A lot has been already told by my auditors about what is the scope of financial services. मैं एक चीज़ और बताना चाहूँगा कि एज ए यंग चार्टेड और एज ए न्यू प्रैक्टिशनर, ये नई लाइन है जो अपन आज एक्सप्लोर कर सकते हैं। अपन ये देखा है कि इनकम टैक्स का स्कोप धीरे धीरे कम हो रहा है। जीएसटी इज मोर टुवर्ड्स कंप्लायंसेस रेदर देन एनी टेक्निकल पार्ट। सो अपन को एज ए चार्टेड अकाउंटेंट अपन को अब ये देखना पड़ेगा कि कहाँ अपने नए लाइन से कहाँ नए स्कोप्स जनरेट हो रहे हैं। एंड थैंक्स टू हर्षिता मैम जो अपने हमारे चार्टेड्स को ये बताने वाली कि क्या क्या स्कोप्स अवेलेबल हैं इन स्टार्टअप्स। मैं एक दो स्टार्टअप्स के बारे में, एक दो फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज के बारे में बताना चाहूँगा, एंड आई वुड लाइक हर्षिता मैम टू टू टेक एम्फोसिस ऑन कि कैसे हम चार्टेड अकाउंटेंट्स रोल प्ले कर सकते हैं उसमें। फर्स्ट इज द इक्विटी फंडिंग सर्विसेज। वी हैव सीन दिस स्टार्टअप में जो इक्विटी फंडिंग का जो रोल है, एंड मतलब एक चार्टेड अकाउंटेंट, हम बहुत टाइम से एक प्रोजेक्ट फाइनेंसिंग का काम करते हुए आ रहे हैं, बट दैट प्रोजेक्ट फाइनेंसिंग इज लिमिटेड टू बैंक्स ओनली। बट नाउ वी हैव सीन कि स्टार्टअप्स को कैसे फंडिंग मिल रही है, उनकी कैसे वैल्यूएशन होती है, उनका क्या क्राइटेरिया होता है वैल्यूएशन का। एंड दो अपन एक फाइनेंस मार्केट से डील करते हैं, अपन एज अ चार्टेड अकाउंटेंट अपन फाइनेंशियली हमेशा बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स देखते रहते हैं। तो अपन को एक एक नया स्कोप है इस लाइन में कि अपन कैसे स्टार्टअप्स के लिए इक्विटी लेकर आए बाहर से, वेदर इट्स फ्रॉम अ प्राइवेट इक्विटी, वेदर इट्स फ्रॉम एफआईआई और किसी भी सोर्स से। अपन को तो एक बहुत नया स्कोप है फॉर चार्टेड अकाउंटेंट्स। And the other charter and the other scope is the using of the softwares that are available in the market. जैसे प्रकाश सर ने बोला था, अभी आईसीआई भी बहुत सारे अपन को सॉफ्टवेयर्स दे रहा है, लाइक ऑडिट सॉफ्टवेयर्स आर अवेलेबल टू अस, जो शायद अपन को रिसेंटली आईसीआई अभी तक उन्होंने अपन से एक फॉर्म फिल किया है कि हु ऑल आर इंटरेस्टेड इन यूजिंग द ऑडिट टूल्स। तो आई थिंक बहुत मेजर स्कोप है अपन एज ए चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट्स के पास, जहां अपन स्टार्टअप्स को हेल्प भी कर सकते हैं, प्लस इस लाइन में अपन एक अपना नया जो स्कोप है उसको अपन एक्सप्लोर कर सकते हैं। In the end, I would like to thanks Prakash Sharma sir for initiating such a nice topic, and also like to thank Harshita ma'am, for who took his precious time for this seminar. Thank you very much. Over to Prakash sir.
थैंक यू आकाश, थैंक यू फ्रेंड्स। आज मॉर्निंग में न्यूज थी कि जो बैंकिंग इंडस्ट्री और इंश्योरेंस सर्विसेज इंडस्ट्री है उसको फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट आ रहा है, उसको कंट्रोल करने के लिए नोडल एजेंसी रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया और IRDA को रखा गया है, और वो दोनों उसको कंट्रोल क्या करेगी, उसको असेस क्या करेगी। मीनिंग बाय कि आने वाले टाइम में बहुत जल्दी उस सेक्टर में भी जो प्राइवेटाइजेशन होने जा रहा है, और इवन जो अपने कुछ PSU बैंक हैं उनमें भी फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट आएगा और इंश्योरेंस कंपनीज में भी आएगा। जो हमारा ट्रेडिशनल फील्ड है फ्रेंड्स, वो डे बाय डे उसका स्कोप खत्म होता जा रहा है। मैं काफी प्लेटफॉर्म्स पे बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट इंफॉर्मेशन शेयर कर चुका हूं, मैं फिर भी एक बार वापस आप सब लोगों से शेयर करना चाहूंगा। फ्रेंड्स, 5G टेक्नोलॉजी हमारी कंट्री में आने के लिए बहुत फोर्सफुली एप्लीकेबल होने जा रही है, बहुत स्पीडली उसमें काम चल रहा है, और हम ऑलरेडी वैसे इसमें 1 साल लेट है, लेकिन अभी काम चल रहा है उसमें ऐसा लगता है कि मैक्सिमम 6 महीने से 1 साल के अंदर अंदर में हम 5G टेक्नोलॉजी पे आ जाएंगे। एंड बिलीव कीजिए फ्रेंड्स, 5G टेक्नोलॉजी के आने के 1 साल के अंदर अंदर जो अभी हम एक क्लाइंट के लिए 3 जगह डिफरेंट इंफॉर्मेशन देते हैं, इनकम टैक्स में अलग रिटर्न फाइल करते हैं, GST में अलग करते हैं, और वही हमारा क्लाइंट यदि कंपनी है तो आज अलग रिटर्न फाइल करते हैं, इवन बैंक में उसकी बैलेंस शीट से अलग देते हैं, वो सारी की सारी इंफॉर्मेशन गवर्नमेंट भेजेगी और पूरा कंप्लीट कंप्रेहेंसिव इंफॉर्मेशन होगी। वो एक ही इंफॉर्मेशन चारों डिपार्टमेंट में जाएगी, इनकम टैक्स में भी, GST में भी, बैंक में भी, और इवन कंपनी है तो ROC में। मीनिंग बाय जो अभी हम प्रैक्टिसिंग चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट हैं वो मेनली 3 तरह का काम करते हैं, कंप्लायंसेस का, कंसल्टेंसी का और लिटिगेशन का। जो कंप्लायंस है फ्रेंड्स, और मेजरली हमारे प्रैक्टिसिंग मेंबर्स उसका बहुत बड़ा काम करते हैं, उसकी बहुत बड़ी रिसिप्ट है। ये मान के चलिए फ्रेंड्स कि 5G टेक्नोलॉजी के एप्लीकेबल होने के मैक्सिमम 2 साल के अंदर अंदर हम इस स्टेज पे होंगे कि वो हमारा फील्ड हमारे हाथ से चले जाएगा।
अपना वाला वो आई नहीं
में एक रिक्वेस्ट जो CBDT ने मार्च एंड में एक छोटा सा सर्कुलर निकाला था कि जो भी आपकी यदि कोई कंपनी है तो उसमें यदि वो अकाउंटिंग सॉफ्टवेयर यूज कर रहे हैं, अकाउंटिंग में उन्होंने साल भर में जो भी चेंजेस किए हैं वो ऑडिट ट्रेल आपको रिपोर्ट करनी है। हालांकि वो सर्कुलर 1 साल के लिए पोस्टपोन कर दिया, लेकिन फ्रेंड्स 1 साल बाद वो एप्लीकेबल होने वाला है। और क्वेश्चन ये है कि क्या एक चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट ऑडिट इन्फॉर्मेशन देने के लिए कैपेबल है, ये बहुत बड़ा क्वेश्चन मार्क है। फ्रेंड्स, यह इंफॉर्मेशन ऐसी है जिसको कि जिस सिस्टम ऑडिट की वो है पहले 5G टाइम में मैक्सिमम 5G टेक्नोलॉजी के एप्लीकेबल होने के 1 साल के अंदर अंदर हम सिस्टम ऑडिट में कन्वर्ट हो जाएगी। फाइनेंशियल ऑडिट सिस्टम ऑडिट का एक बहुत छोटा सा पार्ट रह के रह जाएगी। मेन ऑडिट फिर 2 ही रहेगी, सिस्टम ऑडिट और फॉरेंसिक ऑडिट। ये मेजर चेंज हमारे प्रोफेशन में आने वाला है, और उसके लिए हमको अपने आप को अभी से प्रिपेयर करना पड़ेगा। अभी से हमको कुछ न कुछ अल्टरनेटिव लाइंस देखनी पड़ेगी, उसमें हमारे को अपना कंसंट्रेशन करना पड़ेगा। और जो ये आपसे शेयर किया मैंने किस कर रही है, उसके बाद में जो वो प्योरली एंड प्योरली डॉक्टर वाला होगा। कोई एक फील्ड हमको चूज करनी होगी और उस एक फील्ड में हमको अपनी एक्सपर्टीज करनी होगी, प्लस हमको नॉलेज होनी चाहिए कि हम आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस और डेटा एनालिटिक्स को अपने प्रोफेशन में कैसे यूज करें, बिकॉज उसका यूज बहुत ज्यादा होगा। वो एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चैलेंज हमारे लिए होगा। हमने इसीलिए अभी 2 महीने पहले हमारे सारे मेंबर्स से पूछा था कि हम आपको कुछ ऑडिट टूल्स फ्री ऑफ कॉस्ट देना चाहते हैं, आप लेना चाहेंगे क्या? रेस्पॉन्स बहुत पुअर था, लेकिन मेरी सबको सिंसियर रिक्वेस्ट है फ्रेंड्स कि हमारे पास ऑप्शन नहीं है, अल्टरनेट नहीं है, हमको करना ही पड़ेगा यदि हमको इस प्रोफेशन में रहते हुए कुछ फंक्शंस करने हैं। के लिए डिफरेंट टूल्स हैं, एंड मेरे को बहुत खुशी हो रही है आपसे इंफॉर्मेशन शेयर करते हुए कि इंस्टीट्यूट लेवल पे हमने 50 करोड़ का सॉफ्टवेयर ऐसे हैं हमारे प्रैक्टिसिंग मेंबर्स को, इवन जो जॉब में है उनके लिए भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है कि कोई लेना, वो चारों आप बहुत लेने जा रहे हैं, बहुत स्पीडली चाहिए कि नवंबर या पर कर सकेंगे। तो इन कुछ टुगेदर नई लाइनें बहुत आई हैं जो कि मेरे को लगता है कि हमारे प्रोफेशन में बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, लाइक साइबर लॉज। सबसे ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट हो गए कि जैसे कोविड पीरियड आया, हमारी 100 टाइम ऑनलाइन बैंकिंग सर्विसेज का काम बढ़ गया, लेकिन 500 टाइम साइबर क्राइम बढ़ गए, और साइबर लॉज में इतनी फाइनेंशियल इन्वॉल्वमेंट जो डिपार्टमेंट्स हैं वो लोग भी बहुत ज्यादा अपसेट हैं कि साहब हम टेक्निकल पार्ट तो हम कंप्लीट कर पा रहे हैं, हम फाइनेंशियल पार्ट को कैसे कंप्लीट करें। उसके लिए भी आपसे एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट अच्छी न्यूज शेयर करना चाहूंगा आपसे कि कल ही इंस्टीट्यूट ने राजस्थान में एक बहुत बड़ी यूनिवर्सिटी है जो कि जोधपुर में राजस्थान गवर्नमेंट की पुलिस यूनिवर्सिटी है, उस यूनिवर्सिटी के साथ में एमओयू किया है, और हम बहुत जल्दी ऐसे कोर्सेज लेके आ रहे हैं जो कि इसमें इंस्टीट्यूट और पुलिस की जो यूनिवर्सिटी है इसे बनाएंगे, उपयोग बहुत यूजफुल होंगे, फॉरेंसिक का, सिस्टम ऑडिट का, सिक्योरिटी ऑडिट का काम करने के लिए बहुत बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होंगे। फ्रेंड्स, लेबर लॉज हैं क्योंकि अभी जस्ट 8 अप्रैल को इस पे प्रेसिडेंट ने साइन कर दिए हैं, लेकिन कोविड पीरियड के कारण से अभी गवर्नमेंट ने इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं किया है। मैक्सिमम 3 से 6 महीने के अंदर वो भी इम्प्लीमेंट हो जाएंगे। रेरा एक्ट नया आया है कुछ सालों पहले, अकाउंट्स का बहुत ज्यादा रोल है। सिस्टम ऑडिट मैंने आपसे शेयर किया कि आने वाला फ्यूचर कैसा है 5G टेक्नोलॉजी के बाद में, फॉरेंसिक ऑडिट है। और स्टार्टअप की अपन यदि बात करें तो फ्रेंड्स, स्टार्टअप इंडिया में स्टार्ट होते हैं वो कहीं भी नहीं है, बट इसमें एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट इंफॉर्मेशन ये है कि 95% स्टार्टअप्स बंद हो जाते हैं, और वो बंद होते हैं मेनली अपने फाइनेंसेस को प्रॉपर्ली मैनेज नहीं कर पाने के कारण। इसमें जो भी नया स्टार्टअप आ रहा होता है प्रोफेशन में, इंडस्ट्री में, उसमें बहुत सारे रोल हैं जहाँ पे कि हमारी इंपॉर्टेंस है, हम वहां पे बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट कर सकते हैं। जो आज का सेशन है, ये एक चार्ट अकाउंटेंट है, हमारे एक चेयरमैन साहब ने कहा कि एडवोकेट Hashita is not an advocate, she's a member of our profession. She is from Alwar, she works in Delhi, but presently since people are working from home, she's now involved. We are very grateful that a girl from our state is doing wonderful work in the society. Is very good. एंड बहुत बड़ा उस प्रोफेशन की तो कितना बड़ा स्कोप है, कितनी अच्छी लाइन है, दैट इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। और मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि हर्षिता आज की जो स्पीकर है टू हर्षिता जी।
Thank you so much. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Yes,
Prakash.
very audible.
Ji. Thank you. Thank you so much for such a wonderful introduction. Our very own Prakash Sharma ji was very, very experienced Central Council member. He's chairman of Banking and Financial Services, and Insurance Committee. Is doing a wonderful job in educating our fellow members about various. think there's, yeah. About the opportunities that are opening up for our fellow chartered accountants who have been in practice, and especially the young chartered accountants who are now entering into practice or now starting their careers. It's very important to have a deep understanding of what all areas are there in which they can work apart from the traditional audit, taxation, and financial services that CAs have been giving for years, and which have been a very important part and very, very a common practice, which I believe all of us have worked in. All of us have worked in audits, all of us have worked in accounting, all of us have done some work in taxation, but there are some new areas which are opening up, which are extremely, extremely, definitely lucrative opportunities, as well as they are extremely big opportunities for CAs to participate in and to explore and expand their careers. So big thank you to Prakash Sharma ji. Thank you to Akash ji, Anil ji, Sachin ji, regional council members. We have 5 branches here, and their chairpersons. We have Navratan ji, Rakesh ji, Ashish ji, Balveer ji, and Lakesh ji. Thank you to them for being here, for being a part of this program. And now I'm going to start without taking much time. I'm going to be sharing my screen. Please confirm once you start seeing it.
Can you, Arshita ji?
Can you see my screen?
Can you hear me, Arshita?
Ji,
No, ma'am.
ji. Just give me a
Now
moment.
we can see your screen. Now, yes.
Right. All right. So as we have today's topic, which is the scope of financial services. Also, just before I start, if anyone has any questions, I would like to take it up in the middle of the session. You can always ask me any questions in the middle of the session if there's anything that comes up, because obviously it's very difficult to stay on hold and remember the session the question till the end of the session. So I would encourage that. If anyone has any questions, you can please ask them during the session. So we're going to be talking about the scope of financial services in startups, as our esteemed members have already touched upon the various developments, recent news that has come up in the fintech sector, in the financial services space, especially in the banking space. Here I'm going to be talking about startups in general, not just fintech startups. So this is going to be the scope of financial services, basically what all areas are there where CAs can help the startups and support them in multiple domains. And I am personally connected with a lot of CAs who are doing a lot of amazing work, especially in the startup sector, because my practice is mainly surrounding the startup space. That is the reason, and most of them are doing amazing work. All of them are doing really great work in this space, and have chosen their own specific niche. They've all chosen their specific areas where they want to specialize in, and are practicing in those areas. So that is really important for all the professionals now, that we pick our specialization, we choose our niche, and we stick to that, so that we can establish our own practice and our own identity in that space, and have a deep sort of knowledge in that particular area. So now starting off, second, yeah. Just to start off, just a brief description about what is a startup. As we all already are aware, all the members are quite aware what exactly constitutes a startup. There is no exact specific definition of startup. But in general, how we define a startup is that it's a newly established business, which is usually, started by one or two or three, individuals, and it usually focuses on offering a new product or new service which is not given elsewhere. It could be a completely revolutionary product. It could be something which is not present in the market right now, or it could be something which is just a better version of something that existed. So you would see so many startups which are more on the, which are based on the business model, which is a slight innovation on a previously existing startup or a previously existing business model. So in that case, those businesses would be termed as startup. And the key word is innovation. Key word, that really is the highlight of the definition is surely the innovation that comes, and with the technology being the enabler of such innovation. And the product or the service should be, something that has some sort of value that it provides to the user, and some kind of efficiency that they offer. So that's about startups. Lately, we are hearing a lot of news. I believe most of our members would be aware that this year we've had a great year for startups. We have almost 21 startups who have recently entered the Unicorn Club, as we call it, which is basically all the startups whose valuations have increased beyond $1 billion, which is great news for the Indian startup ecosystem. I think now that it is so evolved, and there are so many stakeholders and very, very active players, so many VCs, so many incubators, so many accelerators operating, and they're enabling these, and so many financial professionals like CAs, advocates, lawyers, working with startups and helping them reach such heights, and all the contribution goes to them for supporting all these startups, helping them raise funds, helping them with the compliances, helping them with the planning, the financial planning of the businesses. As Prakash sir rightly said, 95% of startups, more than 95 in fact, percent of startups actually fail within the first year or second year of starting, only because, and majority of them because of lack of funds or lack of cash flow that happens in their business. So it's very, very important that us as finance professionals and as people who are working towards developing the economy, developing the systems, developing the business scenario, we help the startups and help them with the complete guidance and support that they need, which is very, very crucial and important for these startups to grow and to even survive. So it's CAs can play a huge role, a big part in this entire transformation that's happening right now, especially the post-COVID scenario, where we are seeing majority of the traditional businesses, actually a lot of them have shut down. My own family, we have been running a traditional business for the last 40 years, and at this time it is really not possible to to actually have, for a lot of businesses, there is no sales. The operations are still going on, but the sales is not happening because of many factors, many changes that have happened. For example, just giving an example of a family business. So basically it's about school uniforms. Now schools are shut, so no sales. So in that sense, a lot of traditional businesses are now finding ways to go online, build an online presence, and to digitize their entire operations in that way, so that they can actually keep up with the requirements of the time. So even traditional businesses are now, we cannot really call them startups as such, but yes, they are trying to come to the digitization mode, and they're trying to come to the online platform. They're now open to accessing services like cloud computing, cloud accounting, bookkeeping services. They're taking them from a lot of accountants and CAs up, helping them with that. So the entire digitization has been really the key word for the Indian business scenario, and is increasingly getting very, very popular, even in the remotest of areas. And as rightly mentioned, right now I'm working from home. I only have to, step out for meetings. So I keep traveling whenever I have to do meetings, but even majority of the meetings I'm able to do from home only because we have, such wonderful startups who have enabled this for us. They have workforce management tools. So many of them are there, which are workforce management tools, team management tools. We have, of course, for meetings, we have platforms like Zoom, which has become a huge highlight, especially post pandemic, and so many other startup products that we are using on a day-to-day basis, and have become such a crucial part of our life right now, which we would not have imagined. So that really shows the importance of startups, and the scope that it has now gotten that has gotten highlighted. So, of course, Mr. Narendra Modi, who's our honorable Prime Minister, has been, has set up the Startup India scheme for the, encouragement of startups. He's doing a great job at promoting these startups and providing a lot of schemes, a lot of benefits. This year itself, we have had the announcement of seed fund for startups, which we will cover later. So, startups in India have a big opportunity coming up, and with the coming of FDI, which is really, we are looking at good numbers. That is what is expected in the next 2 to 3 years. We will have good amount of foreign investment coming in India, and majority of these investments are going to go towards startups, and that is the major reason why it's high time to focus on startups as a clientele, or as a focus area for our for our services. Now, just to start off with a basic recognition of Startup India, I thought I'll start with that, which is a lot of startups and businesses. Although it is free, it is available on startup website, the government website for Startup India. But we are still a lot of businesses still need help in the space, and where CAs can actually come in and help these startups with applying for these Startup India registrations. So how to go about it? Just covering the basic information that one needs to know for this recognition under Startup India by DPIIT. So the eligibility criteria here, as we said, the startup should either be incorporated as a private limited company or a partnership firm or an LLP. These are the three forms under which they register. If it's a proprietorship, if it's an HUF or a society, you cannot really register as a startup. So this is the first very important thing. As a business structure, you can advise your clients, you can advise the startups you're working with to register as a partnership firm or an LLP or a private limited company. The turnover limits as mentioned, are under 100 crores. It should be less than 100 crores for any of the financials. Even if it crosses 100 crores in any one financial year, it is not to be recognized as a startup. The entity shall be considered as a startup for up to 10 years of the date of incorporation. But this limit of 10 years is actually, there are different limits available in different schemes that we have, that startups can avail. For example, that for the tax holiday, it's available only up to 7 years from the date of incorporation, and for any 3 consecutive years. So similarly, for different schemes, for availing of those schemes, we have different timelines that are in place. Then, of course, the startup should be working towards innovation or towards improvement of existing products or services or processes, and should have the potential. And this is very important. A lot of times when people are making their applications, they forget about this point, which is very crucial. It should have the potential to generate employment or create wealth. Extremely important. An entity which is formed by splitting up, basically through a demerger of an existing business, or a reconstruction of an existing business, sale of a business, that will not be considered as a startup. It has to be a brand new, product or service introduced by a new company or a firm. Now, the steps, just to get the recognition, what are the steps? First, obviously, being the incorporation of the business as a private limited partnership firm, LLP. Then registration application is very easily available on Startup India. Anyone can register there and apply. It's completely free of cost. Very, very simple, and it's online completely. You don't have to go anywhere or submit any physical documents. You have to just log in on the Startup India website and enter your business details. Next step will be to apply for DPIIT recognition, which is Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. Now, by availing this recognition, you can become eligible for all the schemes and all the areas that government has been promoting the startups with. So getting the recognition, you have to, of course, submit all the details. You have to make sure that you confirm and supply all the information in the application that confirms the points that we saw earlier, which is innovation or wealth creation or generating employment. How is the startup exactly doing that? So the application has to be devised and designed in such a way that it is convincingly and completely providing the entire information that is required for the recognition. So and of course then you can attach various documents, which are of course the pitch deck, if there is a pitch deck prepared, which is usually an investment deck that startups use for raising investments. It's similar to a project report, or a company profile. If you have a website, you have to link the websites, which is extremely important for any tech-based startup to have a basic website or an application. So those are important. And apart from that, of course, any trademarks, any patents held by the startup, they add value to the entire application. So even those can be attached. Now, once you register with the Startup India, you receive a certificate of Startup India. You can apply for various programs, acceleration programs, incubator programs, mentorship programs. ICAI has been doing a great job at setting up incubation programs in multiple chapters. I believe you will see an incubation program in Jaipur as well very, very soon. And this definitely really helps the CA members and entire fraternity, entire CA fraternity finds a big encouragement to set up their, and we see a lot of CAs actually starting their own tech-based companies, their own startups, their own businesses, and it will be a great help for them as well, for providing the complete support, mentorship, and access to investors for these startups. So as we already covered, once you have the DPIIT registration, you can apply then for multiple benefits and schemes that Government of India provides under Startup India scheme, and some of them I've mentioned here, which is easy winding up of companies, the self-certification under labor environmental laws, especially if you're setting up a factory, which is really, really important for setting up industries. These licenses and other certifications are extremely important. One has to take care of them. In IPR, when you're applying for trademarks, patents, there's faster processing. There's a waiver of the government fees that are payable on these registrations. So a lot of benefits are available like that to startups, and definitely government is still introducing a lot of these schemes and benefits for promotion of startups and helping them in sustaining the business as well as growing. Now, as I already mentioned, these are the documents required for registration. And the benefits already mentioned, patents, trademarks, design registrations, there's 80%, up to 80% actually. There's reduction in statutory fees. The timeline is faster for if you attach a Startup India certificate, so all those benefits are available. And these benefits have been mentioned. 3 years of tax holiday, tax exemption, if you apply under Section 80 IAC, and 100% of the profits for any 3 consecutive years will get, the startups will get a complete 100% tax rebate. Now, coming to the compliance support, apart from Startup India registration, which is a very basic registration, it's just a one-time application, and that's where you can start reaping the benefits of being a startup, being a government recognized startup. Now we're going to just learn about what are the various compliance support, basic compliance support basically, which is required by startups at a very, very early stage. Starting from the very basic first step of starting any business, you have to select the entity structure and it can change from time to time as the business grows, as the scale goes up. A lot of businesses start with the proprietorship, later on convert into LLPs or private limited companies, or even later on private limited companies, if the business is very, very successful, get a chance to get listed as well and convert into public limited companies. So entity structure can keep changing depending on the scale and the requirements and the timeline and the nature of business of the company. So, but of course, private limited for startups is a very it's the most popular step and form of registering the business. So once and this will obviously have an effect on the liabilities of directors, the tax implications, the statutory compliances. A lot of people are hesitant to register as company only because of the statutory compliances. But if one is able to, educate them, if a CA is able to educate them, or a finance professional is able to educate them about the various benefits that you get, that you receive as a startup if you register as a private limited company, it can help the startup in the long run. They can raise investments. They can, of course, scale up the team very easily. They can hire experienced people on equity basis, which they cannot do in any other structure. So these are some of the benefits that one receives if they are registered as private limited company, which is the most popular at the moment as well. Now, as we are all aware, these are the various types of organization structures available. Now, another thing which startups at very early stages require help and support in, and to mitigate the risk and to define the roles and responsibilities, it's really important to have contracts in place, to have agreements in place. Few CAs do provide these services, and I see a lot of lawyers providing the drafting and vetting of agreements and services related to that. But CAs are also, and CAs, CS, CMAs all are aware of the business laws and can provide the services if that is of something of their interest. So for sure, any signing of contracts with the employees, with the co-founders, with the directors, with the CXOs of the company, or with the vendors or customers. So all of these contracts can be drafted by CAs or by. Now we have the concept of which is a very, very interesting we have guidelines issued by ICAI, which is regarding the multidisciplinary firms. So in these kind of firms, it is very much possible for CAs to have team members who are experienced or who have knowledge about these kind of services. If you are not an expert in the area, your partner can be, and you can definitely provide these services. So that is an area which we can keep our eyes open to and take benefit of the same and use it. Now, various types of contract, as mentioned, you have the commercial contracts with the vendors, customers. To start a franchisee, there's a whole different set of contracts and legal documentation required. There are SLAs which they sign with a lot of service providers, especially in the corporate scenario. That we see a lot of SLAs being signed, service level agreements, basically. Those kind of things come under commercial type of contract. Then we have HR contracts, which is, of course, the founders being the directors of the company will become executives. So it is important to initially have a co-founders agreement and to define the rights and responsibilities in case there's a dispute in future. We have a resolution through the agreement. Then the employee appointment, employee appraisal, and all the other HR related documents, agreements, consultancy agreements, non-compete and non-solicitation. This is very, very important, and it can be added as a clause in multiple other agreements, and there can be a separate non-compete signed with the interested parties. Transactional agreements are there, like joint venture, M&As, investment agreements, which we call shareholders agreement, basically. And then there are concession, project financing, which we are well aware of. And comes the IPR related, intellectual property right related agreements, licenses to assign an IPR to another company or another entity. We have assignment of IPR, NDA, technology transfer. Whenever we are doing large joint ventures or two companies are coming together, there's big technology transfer happening, and if one company holds the right, the intellectual property right over the technology, to transfer the technology, certain contracts are put in place. So these are various types of contracts that we can help the startups with. Then comes the IPR. A lot of, and surprisingly enough, it's a very small portion, but a lot of CAs, including myself, are now working on intellectual property rights as well. So when it comes to IP protection, of course, multiple steps come in the process, and it's not just contrary to popular belief, it's not just a one-time service. It's not just a one-time registration. Of course, if there's renewal every 5 years or 3 years, depending on what kind of protection it is. And then there's a constant monitoring. There's specialized servers which do this constant monitoring of market activities and checks, keep checks in place, that if I am the registered trademark holder or brand name holder, if there's anybody right now who's using the same trade name, to be able to identify them, to be able to send the right, to take the right legal action to them, for them, and to send the right kind of documentation and notices and all the other things, litigations that might happen later in the future. So all of these things come under IP protection, and it's a regular, continuous form of service that is given. And there are multiple courses available for the same, for anybody who might be interested in knowing about the same. Or, I mean, of course, majorly we have trademark attorneys, patent attorneys who are who are experts in the area, and it is definitely a great opportunity to have them as part of your team, or to collaborate with them, or to have them as associate, and they can help with these kind of expertise on these kind of services related to the IPRs. Then these are the various types of IPRs: trademark, copyright, patent, industrial design. Different timelines are there for each of them. Different modes of application are there. One needs to be an expert to actually understand and to apply and to successfully resolve all the objections, to reply to any kind of hearing notices or anything. One needs to have knowledge about it. So if one is interested in learning, there are multiple courses available and multiple resources available for learning, regarding to have knowledge about IPRs, which is very much a part of the legal side of compliances. But again, if you can advise your client on IPRs, they would be very happy with expertise being provided and under one platform. Then comes the various compliances and licenses, which most CAs are already helping the startups with, or any of the clients with, which is getting the basic registrations, the GST, service tax, IEC code, the import-export code, basically. PAN-TAN. Usually when you're registering a company, all of these you receive automatically. IEC you have to apply separately. Even ESI, PF registrations are applied now with the new SPICE Plus form introduced by MCA. We have the option of, with an agile form, we can apply directly. Along with incorporation, you will receive the registration for ESI, PF, professional tax, and for GST as well. Then comes the board and general meetings. So these are more towards the secretarial compliances, the board meetings, the general meetings, all the maintenance of records relating to it, to guide these startups relating to how they are supposed to conduct these meetings. What is a decorum? What is a quorum? What is the presence that is required? What is how to pass these resolutions? So all of these, somebody who's starting a business afresh and starting with a private limited, they need to understand these these requirements. Statutory filings with MCA, with ROC, maintaining the statutory registers, for example, the register of related party transactions, or the registration of charge, or any other registers as required under the law, especially by the Companies Act. Then comes the Shops and Establishment Act registration, basic registration, pretty much one of the first registration that a business takes. So that is the first registration that comes in mind. Then comes the other clearances and licenses, which are mostly very, very important for the manufacturing sector. For setting up a factory, it's important to have these licenses and clearances. Otherwise, especially if you're setting up a food related business, there is FSSAI license, there's AgMark, there's an Ayurvedic product, there's Ayush license. Multiple other things are there if you're setting up under a medical industry or a medical business. So in that there's a separate drug license. There is a other host of licenses which are required. So accordingly, depending on the sector and the space which you're operating, the licenses can vary in different areas. Now, I'm just going to talk about the various, the financial services and the scope that is covered by these financial services, which are being provided currently, and there's huge scope for expanding the areas, and these services can be provided by CAs to startups. Now, of course, being the most common and the most popular and crucial functions that a CA and a role that CA plays, which as an auditor, statutory auditor, tax auditor, systems auditor, multiple types of audit, process auditor. In fact, there's multiple types of audits that various companies, various corporates require at multiple stages. So accordingly, statutory audit is compulsory for all the companies, irrespective of whether they are a startup, whether they have any turnover or not. So those are required by every company, every director, and these are things which CAs generally help the startups with. Then of course comes the bookkeeping, accounting services, or financial reporting services. If you're not an auditor, you can help the client with the accounting services, financial reporting, or even internal audit for that matter. A lot of VCAs have a lot of experience with the internal control systems, and identifying the weaknesses and monitoring and suggesting the changes that need to be made, and the regulations and the policies that the company needs to put in place to actually stabilize and improve their internal functions. After that comes the taxation, whether it be direct taxation, indirect taxation. There are multiple services, as we are all aware. Most of the CAs actually doing the regulatory filings, which apparently, as we are seeing the technology grow and evolve, the scope of filing and regulatory compliances will go, I believe, will be reduced to a very small margin. But majority of the the scope will, in my opinion, will stand when it comes to the litigations, the hearings, the department dealing. All of those things will come into highlight. Then comes the investigation. This is mainly related to the forensic services that a lot of CAs are working in, forensic areas, forensic services department, working with banks, working with investors, and investigation services that they're providing on behalf of the the ventures, the companies. This is not specifically for startups, but again, it is an increasingly wide scope and is extremely detailed and deep, requirement and knowledge that is required actually for getting into this area for sure. Especially when there's a due diligence that happens, or investigations usually happen when there's investments going on, or when there's a purchase or sale of business, there's a change in share capital, there's a merger, there's an acquisition, those kind of things. The investigation becomes and plays a big role. Then a lot of finance professionals act as executors and trustees when it comes to registration of wills and trusts. So that is one area. Then comes a special company work, and when I say special company work, it basically specifically relates to the company law, and the secretarial registration work specific to the ROC related compliances. Then comes the directorship. A lot of CAs actually hold board positions in a lot of companies, and advise the startups and the companies on how to, on multiple aspects related to finance and compliances. So that is a very crucial role that they play, and a lot of them do take some equity stake in the same. And then of course the professional compliances you have to take care of with the professional code of conduct. If you're joining as a director on the board, you cannot be an auditor. Multiple other requirements are there. That is why most CAs actually prefer to go for independent directorship in companies. Now we have an exam that we need to clear for becoming eligible to become an independent director. So directorship comes as one key role that we as finance professionals can play. Then comes the investment planning, which is extremely important for most startups who actually are capital intensive, especially a lot of startups in the deep tech space. So when you see cloud computing or when they are developing something which requires a lot of capital input, investment is very, very crucial. Though we do advise our clients to not go for investment when if they, unless it's absolutely necessary, unless they need it completely for their business, unless and until they are in that stage, we generally don't advise to raise investments. Even the working capital is something which most businesses do apply for at an initial stage, but otherwise, planning for investment, how much investment to raise, when to raise investment, what mode of investment to go for, what kind of investor should you look for, how to go about with the entire fundraising. So it's about advising and guiding these startups with the complete process. Then comes the assurance services. So assurance relates to, of course, the review of the financial documents and presenting a true and fair view on the existing financial reports and accounting data of the company. So and multiple other assurance services are provided by CAs. Multiple attestation and certification services are provided. So a lot of these get covered under assurance services as well. Then comes the share valuation, and this is extremely important again in cases of mergers, sale of companies, and in case of investments as well. One needs to be registered as a registered valuer, and you need to clear some exams and have some training in that particular area to be able to be recognized as a registered valuer. And then you can take up the valuation of assets, the valuation of shares of private companies, public companies. This came into big highlight when IBC came into play, and there was sale of stressed assets, and registered valuers were in and still are in very good demand, and very few practicing members actually have expertise over valuation, and there's increasing scope day by day. We are seeing a lot of valuation experts coming up and providing their knowledge across various platforms. Still, I see more lawyers in this space than CAs, but again, the scope is widely increasing, and a lot of members are coming in this area. Then, as mentioned already, there are secretarial matters. CAs, a lot of CAs are also helping with secretarial matters as much as they can. And of course, they cannot do secretarial audits, but there are other areas and especially related to the company's act and compliance with the act and filing with the ROC, that these secretarial matters are of much importance.
Harshita ma'am, you are not audible. Ma'am is just trying. Ganesh, ma'am is just trying. Some network issue is there. Give her a.
Audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So sorry. So sorry for the interruption. Actually, the network there was a dip in the network. I'm sharing my screen again. Please let me know once it's visible. Is it visible? Hello. All right, great. I'll just move to the slide where we were. All right, talking about the startup schemes and benefits that CAs are helping the clients with and helping them avail these benefits to get recognition under ATIAC, which is the startup tax holiday tax rebate that they receive. There's a separate application that needs to be made to the exemptions department, CIT exemptions, for availing those benefits. So CAs can help the startups with that. Then talking about virtual CFO, which is a very, it's something which is really, in highlight. And lately I've been seeing a lot of virtual CFO service providers, coming in India. And basically, virtual CFO is similar to, CA firm. In generally, I see a lot of CA firms actually providing virtual CFO services, but they do not recognize themselves as virtual CFO. Just to summarize in general, what a virtual CFO does is basically it's like outsourcing your entire finance and accounting and audit department to a third entity, to a third party, which is an agency or a firm or a company which provides virtual CFO. So whether it be accounting, bookkeeping, reporting, presenting, preparing budgets, creating dashboards, all the MIS related work, and other areas. So all those areas are covered under virtual CFO. A lot of virtual CFOs also provide legal support. So they kind of act like you don't need to hire an in-house counsel, but you can, if you hire a virtual CFO agency, they help with all of these. So there are quite a few companies that, set up for providing virtual CFO services. It's like outsourcing your entire finance and accounts to a single entity, which actually is very, very useful for startups, because at an initial stage, they do not want to hire too many people, or they do not want to, spend too much in training the employees, or they do not have enough resources. A lot of them don't even have HRs for hiring. So it's important at that stage to outsource completely finance and accounts department, where you have experts working in the back end with all the compliance related work and all the finance related work. That's virtual CFO. Then comes the compliance checkup, already discussed. We, under various laws, whether it be labor laws, whether it be business laws, whether it be Companies Act, whatever compliances are required, just checking up on the compliances, informing these businesses about the compliances and the due dates and the filings that need to be done. Then comes management consultancy. This, apart from the regular work that CAs do, a lot of CAs actually help the startups with strategic support and with the management consultancy services, and helping the startups, these businesses. In fact, a lot of them provide, management consultancy to companies as well, who are not startups. And basically, it's all about, and us being experts in how businesses are run. And a lot of, I mean, you must have heard this from a lot of people, that CA understands a business sometimes more than the proprietor or the owner of the business, and this actually stands true in many cases. So they understand how to have effective utilization of resources, how to improve the operations, how to do cost optimization, how to effectively, achieve the goals and set targets for the company, how to, and then of course helping them with strategic support. So this can be given as a separate line of, services to these startups. Apart from that comes various financial consultancy services. Now, this, of course, very early stage startups cannot really afford to pay for consultancy. They can barely just about, to face the reality. I mean, that's really the truth. They can barely just afford to pay for compliances and audit services. So financial consultancy is actually required mainly for funded startups, for startups who are at a certain scale, who have already raised multiple rounds of funding and are planning to, enter into different markets, different countries, expanding their operations like, in various areas. So in those companies especially, it's very, very important to provide these financial consultancy services. Now comes the MIS, the developing an MIS, dashboard or a system. ERP systems are sometimes developed by CAs for a lot of businesses. Designing the budgetary and control system in play, putting that in place. Of course, when there is capital raised, whether it be by loans, whether it be by equity, determining the measures of effective utilization of capital, which is extremely important. We see a lot of startups even failing after raising funds. Why is that? Because they don't know where to put those funds. They don't have systems in place or proper planning in place for effective utilization of capital. It's not necessary for startup is raising funds. They will, if grow and become a unicorn, or go on to increase and improve their operations. A lot of times it so happens, and sadly so, but it happens that even though the startups have raised a lot of funds, but they're not able to survive. So it's important for a finance professional to come in and to explain to them why it's important for them to understand where to put in the money. It's important to understand that when startups are raising money from investors, there's a lot of pressure from the investors because they want return on their capital, they want return on their investment, and there's a lot of pressure on performance. There's a lot of pressure on investing heavily in marketing. There's a lot of cash burn that happens. Specifically, there's a cash burn assessment that's done for startups. For regular companies, they understand because they have been in operations for a number of years. So they focus more on sustainability. But in case of startups, because of the kind of scenario that we are seeing right now, scalability somehow has become more important than sustainability. And that is why it's really, really important that while you're becoming a scalable startup, it's important that wherever you're putting money, you have the long-term vision in mind. So, of course, CA can help in that area really, very well. Then comes the cost accounting system, installing a cost accounting system. I see a lot of finance professionals also providing cost optimization services to startups or to businesses, where they help them reduce their cost, whether it be direct cost, whether it be indirect cost, advise and put proper systems in place and help these businesses to cut the costs, which is extremely, extremely important. Then coming to assisting the management in efficient use of working capital. Working capital raise is different from the big large capital raises. So of course the efficient use of the working capital is also very important, whether it be for payment of rent, payment of salaries. Now a lot of companies are actually saving that cost of rent, as most of their teams, especially the IT companies, most of the teams are working from home, and so they are able to cut down the working capital requirement that they have, and of course that increases the profits in turn. So that really helps. Assisting the management with these kind of services really, really helps. Then advising the management on principles of organization and delegation and planning. You almost become an advisor, the go-to guy for any financial need, any financial requirement that the startup may have or the founder may have. So that's one of them. Then comes the international taxation matters, foreign collaboration, joint ventures, having knowledge about double taxation agreements, and guiding the startups on that, because a lot of startups, especially being tech companies, it's very easy for them to scale globally. If somebody is setting up a factory and producing a physical product, it's they have to think, and they it obviously takes a lot of time to cover India and then to scale abroad. It may take 10 years, it may take 15 years, it may take 30 years sometimes for such companies, because India is in itself a large market, especially when we talk about B2C. But for IT companies, for businesses which are running on applications and technology, it can be implemented anywhere with very little capital. So it's very, very important for us to and for them to actually have knowledge and to have the right expertise with them regarding the various, if they are going to expand in USA, you should have knowledge, you should have a professional who helps you understand the US laws, who helps you understand how to set up a subsidiary in US, which state to put up a subsidiary in, which is the best state. Of course, Delaware being the most popular destination because of various reasons. Now, if you're looking to set up in Europe, there are multiple multiple people have multiple sort of opinions on that, which are really important. So accordingly, and a lot of companies now, because they can operate from anywhere and everywhere, and because we are living in such a globally connected world, are now looking at even tax havens, countries where the income taxes or business taxes or even business laws, are the laws that these countries have in place are very, very, friendly for businesses, for tech companies, especially for example, Ireland. Now, Ireland has 12%, 11.5 or 12% taxation rate for companies, and there's a lot of benefits that Ireland provides. Now, Ireland being one of the most, the only English-speaking country in entire Europe, a majority English speaking country, it becomes a hot destination. That's why we see companies like Apple, companies like Google, companies like Microsoft putting up their headquarters in Ireland. We have Indian companies like Wipro, putting up their offices over there. So there are very strategic decisions that these companies have to take when they're expanding abroad. And then, of course, regulations related to FEMA, regulations related to RBI, guidelines, all of that they need advisory on the same. So that is a very huge area that is opening up lately, as we are seeing more and more Indian companies scaling across the globe. So these rendering advice on these matters is extremely important. Then coming to procedures and equipment for operational control, this comes in line with the internal audit and internal control systems. Then talking about financial planning and policies for utilization of resources, rendering secretarial already discussed. Then, of course, management on amalgamation, advising the management on these big transactions that take place when there is expansion happening, when the company is setting up a new plant or factory, there's takeover happening or a reconstruction of the company, demerger happening, or sale of companies happening. All of these activities, they need a lot of support on the financial side. Then assisting in the preparation of feasibility study of new project and expansion schemes. A lot of times, when, of course, a lot of project reports are one way of going about it, preparing the, projections for future, the financial projections, financial modeling for future, as well as coming at the valuation and doing a feasibility study, that what is the cost we are putting, what is the revenue we can expect to have, and whether this project is really feasible or profitable, or should we put this capital somewhere else. So it's very important to have the feasibility study for any before investing in any new project or expansion scheme. Then advising on the system analysis and design, like I mentioned, a lot of there's ERP systems and initial stage and at the time of selection of systems and execution, important which softwares, which systems should you put in place for effective operations. So CAs sometimes can advise on that as well. Then assisting in specific business problems like product mix, pricing decisions, making representation to the government agencies. So there are various matters on which they can assist and advise. There are personnel policies and practices, basically again labor laws, payroll processing, and compliances with other gratuity, PF, ESI, all these things. So setting up practices for the same, it's really important and becomes a part of the consultancy services. Assisting in selection of executive personnel sometimes, and this pretty much it's like becoming an inherent part of the management itself, and it's not just staying true to the limited role of a financial expert, but also divulging and expanding your area into other areas of management. That's really important. And especially when we see the resolution professionals coming into practice, and a resolution professional pretty much takes over the position of the board. So you're running the company at that point, and it's a big decision. And there are, of course, finance professionals and CAs who are taking care of and acting as resolution professionals. So it's really important that and that really shows that yes, we do have the skill set of managerial managerial activities and other activities, whether it be in the area of production, whether it be marketing or data processing, whatever it is. So making sure that yes, if we are becoming part of a company, we can not just help in the finance, we can not just help in the compliance, but we can pretty much take over the various aspects that a business might need. Then, of course, drafting of prospectus, the memorandum, whenever there's a public listing of acting as a merchant banker, basically, when there's a public listing of shares of the company. Investment counselor or an investment consultant is one thing that really becomes a highlight for many, especially many startups now, that we are seeing a huge fund flow from outside of India as well as within India. We are seeing a lot of VC funds coming, angel funds coming, who are actually putting in money in startups, investing in startups. So they do need counseling for the same, and then acting as a registrar to issue and transfer of shares, and to actually help with the pre and post funding compliances as well. And these are multiple other areas. Again, this is a very wide scope that we are seeing right now, that so many other things, and we see 90% of the professionals and members practicing in the same taxation and audit and accounting. These are the 3-4 areas which you'd find majority of the members working in, and they have developed an expertise and have a lot of experience in the same fields. But it is quite it is quite lucrative and a very it's an upcoming opportunity to actually, if you consider these areas of work as well. And some of you might have already worked in these areas. Some of you might be thinking of expanding your practice and actually looking at other sort of ways to help the businesses, and to what other roles can we really play. So it's important to understand these areas in detail as well, and then to see whether we have the skill set to actually help these businesses with the kind of skill set and experience we have. Can we really help in these areas? Then, of course, I'm just going to cover this in very brief. Of course, support in integrating with other portals, technology related implementation, highlighting the risk areas and suggesting the potential mitigation strategies for working with those risks, minimizing the risks, and representation to venture capitalists. A lot of time we see CAs or legal experts actually coming and representing the founders, the startups, in front of the investors. So that is also one major area of service that CAs can help. If you think you're good with presentation and you can represent and you have all the details related to the venture, which you can present very well to the capitalist, and of course, along with that, you have the financial and legal expertise. So it really works a lot of times, where there's consultants act as a representative to the VCs, especially if you're part of the management. Then advice on the FEMA regulations, especially if there are cross-border transactions. There is FEMA regulations, there is international taxation. All of these things need to be taken care of. Advising on the formulation of business strategy. This is general investigation of frauds. If you're a forensic auditor, that comes into your you can take the hardware and software selection. It is very rare to see CAs actually working in this area, but there are CAs who are doing this and who have actually this expertise, and we do study, although very briefly, but we do study about IP and IT laws, and it is that if one is interested and you grow that expertise further in this area, one can actually really help with this. So then comes the advice on foreign collaborations, guidance on excise duties, representation before authorities, and preparing budgets and projections. Now, talking about fundraising, as already mentioned, there's fund of funds introduced by the government under Startup India, the SIDB schemes, the multiple other government agencies setting up these funds. There's already a seed fund for, scheme introduced for startups, especially early stage startups who are connected with incubators, acceleration cells, and they can raise seed funds for their product development and the costs that might be related to business development. So there are multiple other funds of funds and various other schemes that are going on, which provide government funds actually, which put government funds into in place with these startups. And then, of course, apart from that, there's private investors, there's foreign investors, there are VC funds, angel funds. So multiple other SEBI registered venture funds actually, which can invest in startups, and one needs to be in compliance with the SEBI regulations for being an active investor in the businesses or in startups. It's a very diverse and a very complex and detailed ecosystem. So I'm not going to go into details, but as mentioned, there are multiple areas. There are angel investors, there are acceleration programs, there are early stage ventures. They're able to raise funds through incubators, through foreign investors, through Indian investors. Angel platforms are there. A lot of angel platforms are there. And there's super angels, multiple things. So, and of course, then at a later stage, they go to VCs, they go to private equity firms, they go to family offices who are actually investing in startups, big sums of money. Then at a later stage, and right now this year, we are also seeing not just the startups becoming unicorn, but we are also seeing a lot of IPOs coming. So Zomato has launched the IPO. So many other companies are coming and launching and getting listed on stock markets. So ultimately, that's the goal. That's the end goal for most startups and most companies actually, to later become a publicly listed company and to raise money through stock markets. Now, what are the various financial services? And I'm focusing specifically on fundraising here, which is being, the highlight pretty much for startups in most cases. Now, what are the various services? If I have to highlight majorly, there are due diligence, valuation, deal structuring, transaction advisory. So deal structuring is basically, of course, breaking down the investment amount after coming at the valuation of the shares, value of the company. Then we advise them, okay, this is how much you should raise if you don't want to dilute this much. This is how you should structure your entire deal. How much to give in equity, how much to raise in debt, how much to go into structured debt, how much to go into, secured debt, unsecured debt, multiple other things. So it's about structuring the entire and working on the taxation part of it as well as the retaining the control. So while retaining the control, how much can you really dilute? So it's really important to structure the deal and to advise them. So these are all part of investment banking services actually, transaction advisory, deal structuring, valuation also. Then representation to investors as discussed. Then comes the legal support to startups. Now, I'm just going to cover two of these in a little bit of detail, which is due diligence and valuation. And of course, this is a very basic, brief touch upon, just touching upon the topics from the top. But yeah, there's much more detail that you can go into, and that will require a lot more time, but just touching upon the topics of due diligence. So now what is the basic process that is involved in the due diligence? So of course, due diligence is an activity which happens at a stage where the startup has already pitched to the investors, the VC funds or the angel investors or whichever investor it is, and the investor has shown interest in going ahead with the investment. They're convinced they're interested basically at this stage. Now they want to check the claims of the startup. So the startup creates a pitch deck and shares with them the various details related to the number of users they have, the number of signups they have, the number of the kind of product they have, the technology they have. So there are multiple other things that they mention. Now the whole objective of the due diligence process is to check the claims of the startup and to assess whether what the startup is saying is actually true or not. So it's similar to an audit and assurance process, and this is mainly done not for the stakeholders or shareholders. This is mainly done for the investors. So you act as you work for the investor on the deal, or for the, even in case of sale of company, you work on the buyer side and actually assess that, okay, what are the, and especially for startups, it's a lot different from what it happens for existing companies, because a lot of times the startups which are raising funds, they don't even have 1 year of financials. Actually, a lot of times they are brand new startups, so it's extremely tricky, and you need to understand what are the various things you need to keep in mind when you're doing a due diligence for a very, very new, extremely new startup, which is almost at the ideation stage. There might be some startups which have a product already, but still, they don't have any revenue, so they might be pre-revenue stage. They could be already in 2 years of operations, already having sales, already having expenses, already the numbers. So number crunching is something we do easily. So under that stage, it's important to understand the numbers that they have and the kind of projections that they're showing. So all these things we have to, the process is very dynamic and keeps changing basis of what kind of startup it is. And especially in startups, it has to change rapidly, because the growth curve in startups is very, very steep, and one needs to understand the process needs to evolve every time a new venture comes, and based on the kind of business they have, based on the stage at which they are. So again, one has to be very, very dynamic in selecting the process and to put the right systems in place. We're just going to cover the due diligence process in a little detail. So, of course, it's important to mitigate risk, to understand the company and the business, to determine the suitability of the investment. And now we're going to talk about how to prepare for the due diligence process. The first thing is to prepare the list of, it's similar to audit, similar to, what we do in statutory audit. And first we make a list of documents that we need from the startup. We share the list with them. We of course we have to, there are data rooms made, or there's there has to be organized system for and secure system for all the database that we're going to receive, all the documentation that we receive. So it can be a due diligence room, it can be created, and it can be hosted on a drive or a cloud. Of course, there has to be a backup and disaster recovery plan in place. This is all, part of systems audit as well, that we study there. Then start due diligence process long before you talk to your first investor. Due diligence process, this is mainly from the point of view of the startups, but we as advisors have to ensure that when we are being approached, and again, we see a lot of legal firms working in this area, very few CAs are actually working in due diligence. And this is one area of opportunity which is again very wide, because as the number of investors and the number of investments is increasing, every time they make an investment, there is a due diligence involved. So if you see the number of investments that are taking place every time, there's one opportunity for a due diligence to happen. So that presents an opportunity in itself. Then comes the understanding the depth and the requirement and defining the scope of the due diligence. Sometimes it's only legal due diligence, sometimes it's only financial due diligence, sometimes it's a complete overall due diligence, where if you have the expertise or if you have the team, you can comment upon the effectiveness of the business, you can comment upon the effectiveness of the product, and multiple other things. So depending on what kind of scope you have in your due diligence appointment, at the time of appointment, basis of that you define the scope. What are the critical documents? Of course, the AOA, MOA, all the filings that are done till date with the MCA, contracts, all the co-founder agreements, all the third-party agreements, employment contracts, NDAs that have been signed, all the asset-related documents that you need, the non-compete, the ESOPs, if any ESOP has been issued or promised to the employees as part of their agreement, we need to keep a check on that, because that is again going to dilute the equity of the company. Then talking about the assets, which is plant and machinery, or even any equipments, that the startup holds, we have to check whether they really hold these, whether they are the ownership, they have the ownership, freehold, lease, or the right to actually use these shares, use these assets or not. So all these things, we have to receive all the legal documents related to that. Then, of course, the financial documents which are required, which is year to date actual and actual data, if they have any, and the plan, historical data if they have any, or if not, then we rely on the future projections. We do take a look at the future projections, which is very important to assess how what are the kind of assumptions that have been made, what are the estimations that they have made, are they reasonable or not? Because at the end of the projections can go left or right, any direction, depending on what kind of assumptions you take. So it's all a game of estimation and assumption. So where one has to be very, very careful in assessing the numbers and the figures and the growth numbers that we are seeing. Are they actually feasible? What is the actual plan in place on the ground, and what is the actual work done for assessing that? Talking about the payables, any creditors, debtors, records, assessing whether they're actually existing or just in the books. The cap table, again, this is very similar to audit. Due diligence is very, very similar to audit. But just that when you're doing a due diligence of a very early stage startups, again, a lot of the data that is mentioned might not be available. So in that case, one has to shift the focus on what is really available and to actually assess the feasibility of all the claims, to actually assess the the actual impact that numbers have on the valuation as well. And also working on the technology and IP protection, whether they do have registered IPs, patents, trademarks, are they objected, are they actually processed, or they are in process. So all of these things we have to see what all licenses the business has. Is there any crucial important license that the business requires but do not have? That can be a red signal, a red flag. The management team, when you're checking their doing their due diligence, and this generally might not happen in audit, but again it becomes part of due diligence because you're doing an overall analysis of the business and checking the management CVs, seeing what are the qualifications and experience of the founders, co-founders, directors of the company, what is the compensation structure they have in place, what are the rights and responsibilities they have, what is the, and verifying whether whatever they're claiming. A lot of times we see fraud claims or incorrect claims being made just for the purpose of effect. We need to check whether this actually exists or not. Doing an internet search on every manager, checking their LinkedIn, checking their profiles, all the or even if we have any queries in mind, if we are not able to satisfy ourselves with respect to the authenticity of the claims being made, then we dive deep and understand a lot more, and do background check and document, we ask for documents, we ask for verification of those. So all these things, you actually, the scope and the length in which you are going to perform due diligence actually depends on the scenario. Then we do the due diligence of the marketing plans, the fully developed GTM, we call it in startup scenario, go to market strategy. When you're launching a new product, how do you plan to launch your product? What is your go to market strategy? What is your marketing plan? What is the budget for marketing? How do you plan to implement? Are you sure that by then we need to assess whether if they are investing this much money, will they be able to actually make this much sales through the money that they're investing? So the strategy is of importance, the investment is of importance, and the entire roadmap that they have for marketing is of importance. What is the scope of competition right now in the market? Do they have any big competitors? What is the pricing? All of these things, they need to be assessed and become part. Then comes the revenue, which is extremely important, the growth assumptions that they have set in the projections. The customer persona is extremely important.Ho is your customer? Who is your target customer? What is your target market size? How much of the market size are you looking to conquer in the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years? All these things are extremely important. How do you plan to conquer the market? How do you plan to get these customers? What is the sales funnel you have? So assessing all these things, these are more qualitative rather than quantitative, as it happens, because in startups, again, when the numbers are not there on the paper, you have to assess the quality and the processes way more than the numbers. So, and how do your investors, where do you deploy the funds that you raise from the investor? What is the cost? We call it CAC, cost of acquiring a customer. So it's customer acquisition cost, CAC. What is the pricing strategy? What is the exit strategy? So all these things are important with respect to revenue. All these questions can be asked. What are the legal actions, any litigations that are in place? Has any of the directors or any of the past companies that they're part of, have they gone into bankruptcy earlier, or any records of non-compliance? Of a lot of times we see directors having being, people being director in 5 companies and 3 of them being non-compliant. So that raises a red flag for sure. What kind of relationships do they have with the shareholders? Is there a management shift? There's a change of directors very frequently. If that is there, that will be a red flag for sure. Do they have insurance for the KMPs, especially if they are working in an industry which is which actually provides or raises some health hazards? In that case, it's important to have insurance for your key managerial person as well as for the employees. Any employees have been involuntarily terminated, and are they really following the process that they're supposed to follow? And if there's anything that raises a red flag, that needs to be noted down and put down in the due diligence report. Now, some deal breakers are there. Again, this is very, very. It's more common sense actually, rather than one does not really. There's no professional course that really tells you how to do due diligence. Very similar to audit, we have to apply a lot of common sense and a lot of vigilance, and that diligence has to be there. As experts, we need to understand and get into in-depth detail of the major important areas. So we need to have, of course, the materiality is also important. We need to understand what are the areas which are really important, and what are the areas we need to deep dive into actually, and what are the areas we can just that we are okay with not going into deep investigation, right? So these prior bankruptcy, prior arrest, any inexperienced entrepreneur or founder is sometimes seen as the sometimes you might be inexperienced, but you might have the right knowledge, and the product that you've developed has the potential in itself to grow, and it has demand. So those kind of things we have to assess and put our own professional valuation and judgment in place to determine whether it's a deal breaker or not. Right. So if the founders are not coachable, they are not ready to take any advice, they are very rigid with their structure. If they do not want to hire people, they do not want to hire the right kind of staff or spend on hiring the right kind of people in the business, and that is affecting the business, it's a big red flag. Then talking about intellectual property, if there's objection in the IPRs, they do not have the proper brand name registered, they do not have the proper license, that becomes a big issue. A lot of times we see early stage startups where the company is not making any profits. In fact, there might not be much revenue, and the founders are still drawing a lot of salary. They're still drawing lakhs of rupees, even though the business is not generating revenue. Now that can be a red flag as well. If they're not ready to accept below market salary, because initially it happens, and in majority of the cases it happens, that initial 3-4 years the startups are not able to make profits. So if your company is not making profits and you're drawing a huge salary, that really comes out as a red flag. If the new capital is being used to pay off current loans, debts, liabilities, that becomes a red flag. Valuation that happens, if the valuation is very much out there and beyond the regular norms, that becomes a red flag. So all these things we can really look at when this is a basic due diligence checklist. Again, because of lack of time, we'll just go through this in very, briefly. We talk about the executive summary, the corporate documents that are there, AOA, MOA, etc. The management details are to be mentioned. So this is basically reporting also pretty much happens in the same format, where all these areas we touch upon and understand, do an analysis, and present our views, our report. So we analyze all these areas: technology, market, customer, financials, agreements, legal, compliances, and business plan analysis, assessment. And then we present our viewpoints on what we think startup is, what are the points we should consider, and what are the suggestions we would make to the investor on that front. Now talking about valuation. Valuation is very important, especially in case of sale or, in case of investment happening. We need to value the shares, we need to value the company, we need to determine the pre-money valuation, post-money valuation. There are multiple other methods. Broadly, three categories are there: cost-based method, income-based method, and market-based method. Now, depending on what kind of startup it is, we have to choose the right kind of method. One more practice which we see now, and a lot of, again, depending on what is the scale and size of investment, a lot of times it's suggested that you do not go for a single, or do not rely on a single valuation report. Although in 90% cases there is a single valuation report, but it's always good, especially if it's a sizable investment, to go for multiple valuation report from multiple firms, so that we know that the valuation that we are doing is not it should be fair, and we need to understand that through multiple, because five firms might be there and they might give different valuations, but if they are similar to each other, then it's we understand that, okay, it's fair to go with any one of the valuation, because again, it's very much on the same lines. But if you see two firms doing the valuation and very, very different from each other, then that poses a red flag. Then you need to see which one to go with and which one seems more fair based on the valuation report. So that is just a practice which you can implement depending on how you want to and how much detail you want to go into the valuation side. But again, it all depends on the size and scale and the kind of operations that we have. Then these are the various factors which need to be considered when determining valuation, which is the team, the market, potential market size, the total addressable market, as we call it, the competitive scenario. So if a company was to say that I'm going to enter into a market where I'm going to compete with companies like Amazon or companies like Flipkart, and it's a brand new business, it's a very small business, then you know that, okay, there's very high chances of the business failing, because they are competing with startups which are already, their valuations are in billions, so of course they have deep pockets. If you see that they have a chance of getting acquired by the startups, you can still see, okay, what is the price at which they will be acquired. Those kind of things we can look at. At the next phase, more weightage will be given to the customer traction, the number of users they have, the pipeline, the sales pipeline they have, what is the past record of conversion, basically sales that's happening from the leads that they're generating, the immediate past performance of last 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, business and financial model. Then these are various methods based on EBITDA, revenue, cash flow based, discounted, etc. I'm not going to go into too much detail. Again, we have very, very small amount of time, I believe. So I'm just going to go through this in brief. What are the points to be factored? Again, performance, expertise, team diversity, and capability of the key management is important. Project, product, and the USP of the product is extremely important. How are you different from the rest of the competition in the market? What is your unique selling point? The industry scenario, whether it is global or local, we have to look at the industry, the way they are performing, who are the major competitors. The country scenario, whether there's, especially if there are regulations in place that can actually affect the business. So those kind of scenarios we need to assess. The total addressable market size, the opportunity that is there, what is the growth expected year on year, month on month. Those things are to be considered for valuation. The competitive landscape, the barriers to competition, what is the user customer stickiness that you have? What do you do to make a customer repeat their transaction with you? And why would they not go to another person who is offering a discount? That is important. What are the barriers that you have created? What are the IPRs that you have, which actually creates a barrier? Or what are the other things, operations that you have, systems you have? Then talking about the risk and mitigation of risk, the measures that you've taken to mitigate the risk. Historical performance, if there is any performance done in the past, we have the financials, we look at that. Then we look at the future projections, the pipeline. What are the clients that you have in pipeline but still not converted? That also sometimes becomes a big aspect. Sometimes you may have government projects, but you need the funds to execute those government projects. So that becomes, customer in pipeline. It does not show in the numbers, but these things actually do matter. What is the quality of revenue? What is it one time, or is it repetitive? Then talking about assets and their value, whether it be intangible assets or tangible assets. What are the liabilities that you have in the financial statements? What are the contingencies that exist in the business? The cash flows that are expected, the tracked, and tracked alongside the revenues that are going to come. So basically, these are the factors. Multiple types of approaches are there. One can go into much more detail. But I'm just going to touch upon them again. Berkus approach, which is again, you started in US. So basically, it's in its assessment of the 5 key success factors. One is the basic value of the product, the technology in place, the execution and strategic relationship in the core market, and production and consequent sales. So that is Berkus approach. Again, the valuation is much more detailed, the method that is being used. We're just going to discuss the approaches. That's it. Cost to duplicate approach. Again, we are always taking into account all the costs and expenses which are associated with the business and the product, and it can be capital, it can be revenue expenses. All of these expenses are taken in order to determine what is the fair market value. Now, again, depending on the industry, we have to assess whether to apply this or not. Future valuation multiple approach. This is basically, you can also call it DCF, basically where discounted cash flow method, as we have all studied and we know very intensely, that you find out the growth projections, the future revenue, future cost, all of that. You determine the cash flows that's going to happen in the future, and you determine based on the future value, there's a multiple that you apply, and based on that the valuation is come at. Then the market multiple approach, recently we are seeing a lot of them where the market is performing, the industry is huge, sizable, especially when it comes to P2P lending or financing businesses. There we apply market multiple approach. Risk factor submission approach, again, looking at the risk factor, whether it be management risk, political risk, manufacturing risk, multiple factors, and then we determine a risk factor submission. We add those elements of risk and we come at a risk factor, and then multiply that with the numbers where we have discounted cash flow, as already discussed. This is the present value. That was the future value multiple approach, and this is determining the present value by the cost of capital, which is called discount rate, and coming at the present value of basis of the future cash flow. Now, some Government of India initiatives are there, which again, do we have time for this or should I skip? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have time for this, sir? It's just 5-6 more slides, I think.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can.
Sure. So we have multiple Government of India initiatives. I'm just going to touch upon them, and again, we can advise them as consultants to how to get these or take benefit of these initiatives. Of course, this is talking about, the tax rebate that is applicable, 100% tax rebate for 3 years out of 7 years after, with reference to Section 80 IAC of Income Tax Act. So after DIPP registration, we can apply for these and avail the tax rebate. Then comes the 54EE, which is going to exempt the long-term capital gain. And this is majorly impactful when we see investors investing and getting the capital gain from sale of shares. And the top line for this is 50 lakhs maximum. That's the maximum which can be invested in the long-term specific asset and should remain invested for a period of 3 years at least. If withdrawn before 3 years, the tax exemption will be revoked. Then comes the Section 54GB, which is providing the exemption from taxes on capital gains arising out of sale of residential house. These, proceeds can actually be invested in equity shares of eligible startup, utilizing the same, and you avail the long-term capital gain exemption under 54GB. Again, there are multiple, angel tax, as we call it, which is investment above the fair market value, and there was angel tax that was applicable. Now the government has exempted subject to some certain eligibility criteria. Now these investments can be by the resident investors, basically angel investors or individuals or family offices, which are not registered as venture capital. So if you're an individual investing in funds and there was angel tax applicable, now any investment which are made by incubators above the fair market value, they're also exempt. Talking about the carry forward of losses in case of eligible startups, that will be allowed if the shareholders, majority shareholders, who have been part of the member of the company and hold the voting power on the last day of the year in which the loss was incurred, they continue to hold shares on the last day of the previous year. In which this loss is to be carried forward. This 51% or more has also been relaxed now for eligible startups. So in that case, you can carry forward the losses. Now, seed capital investment, of course, there's big encouragement from the government side, as already mentioned. If you're affiliated with an incubator, you can apply for seed fund scheme, especially if you're an early stage startup, not older than 2 years. So very new. This is for very new startups. And the scheme has come into operation since July this year. So extremely new and very beneficial for the early stage companies who are still developing the products or the applications. With these benefits, the startups can now easily focus on the business model and the revenue model without really worrying about the compliances, taxes, working capital, etc. So that will really promote the investments into startups as well. So it's a win-win situation. The best time to kind of invest yourself as an and to actually consider startups as not just as an advisor or as a professional, but also you can also look at it as an investor. There's so much that and a lot of us as finance professionals, we do invest our own savings and the money we make in multiple things, majority being security market, secondary markets basically. But a lot of and with the deep understanding that we have now, and it's pretty much openly available, it's very it's a good opportunity that we have to actually invest in startups. Although it's a risky investment, but then high risk, high return. We see investors making 20x, 30x, 50x returns in a matter of 3 years to 5 years. If they invest in a successful startup at an early stage, and this kind of return you cannot find in any industry, you cannot find it in real estate, you cannot find it in secondary markets. So that opens up a wide opportunity for investing in startups as well as associating with startups in the long run, where you can be acting as an advisor or maybe acting as a director in a startup where you can you become part of the team and actually hold equity in this shares, and then when the startup grows exponentially, your investment also, your value of the shares that you're holding also increases exponentially. In this dynamic and challenging business environment, CAs are looked upon as complete business solution providers, and especially with the multidisciplinary firms that we have in operation right now, we can actually provide a lot of services through those firms and through multiple professional support that we can provide. And they're we as CAs are already thoroughly trained in all avenues of finance, accounting, audit, advisory for all types of entities, including and especially focusing on startups. So that's it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for this nice deliberation. There are some questions from the viewers. Can I take that question right now?
Sure. If we have the time, we can take as many questions as per the time.
There is a question from Sanjay Panara ji. He wants to know that do we have any central authority or association for venture capitalists? Something like platform where budding startup can easily approach, or a startup fair, and something like Vibrate Gujarat happening for foreign investment. Is there any near future event for the government regarding this? Just guide us.
From the government side, we have. I'm not sure about the government's involvement in the same, but we have a organization called IVCA. So this is it's like us, like we have multiple associations for multiple professionals. So for VCs and investors, this is an association which is there, IVCA. You can look it up. And this is, again, I'm not sure of whether it's a government affiliated or government organization, how much is the role, but it pretty much acts like how ICAI kind of works like an autonomous body. So it's again an autonomous organization with an autonomous structure. Apart from that, there are multiple angel platforms. There are multiple angel funds and angel platforms. These are SEBI registered category 1 entities who are actually, they provide a platform, and you must have heard, those of you who are active in the startup scenario might have heard of our Ventures or IPV or PSI. There are multiple other, and these are private organizations. They are not government organizations, but again, somebody who is looking to start their operations, or start investing in startups, and they are not sure on how to start. They provide a very good mechanism for educating the investors. They provide a very good platform for co-investing with other investors. So if you are going as a co-investor, your risk gets divided, right? You're one of the 10 or 20 investors who might be investing in that one startup, and at the same time your risk gets divided and distributed amongst all. At the same time, you have the benefit of providing that all the legal compliances, all the due diligence, all the other activities are taken care of by these platforms. There are multiple platforms like that.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thanks for the clearance. And there is a second question from Virendra Sharma ji. They just want to know that every youngster want to come and then just saying that I want to start the startup only. But what is the true meaning of the startup? Because every benefit by the government is only for the startup and not any new venture. So just I want to know what is the true meaning of the startup.
Right. As we already saw in the beginning of the presentation, we had discussed, who is eligible to be recognized as a government, under the government regulations, under DIPP, what makes you eligible to be recognized as a startup. But the focus is majorly on innovation and use of technology in your business. A lot of times you will see a lot of people are not very clear, even if they're starting a business and it's a new business, they think it's a startup, which is not the case. But again, it's just for general simplistic understanding that we call it a startup. But otherwise, yes, to be a government recognized startups, there's certain eligibility criteria. You need to have some form of innovation in your product, in your offering, in your service, in your platform, some value that you're providing which wasn't already existing. It can be a better version of a previously existing product as well. It need not be a brand new offering, but it can be a slightly better version with slightly more features. But important focus is on scalability. It has to be something which is scalable, and it has to be something basically which is operating in a large market, and it has to be technology driven. So innovation is really important, whether it be innovation in processes, whether it be innovation in technology, innovation in the product itself. It can be multiple, in multiple areas.
Yes, ma'am. Just next question is from the Srinivasan Chakravarti sir, but this is directly related to us only. The question is that is there any startup CA group of that we can take their valuable advice from this group? So we have one group and Prakash sir is mentoring the same. And I just request Harshita ma'am to just join that group also, so we can take your guidance from that topic. And any question on the startup we can ask from the Harshita ma'am also. So I request Prakash sir to please add Harshita ma'am on that group. Thank you. And over to you, Anil sir.
Thank you, Sachin ji. Ma'am, Nirmal ji का question है, what are the criteria to define the innovation to register the startup? As you previously told us कि innovation कुछ होना चाहिए, but innovation की क्या है कि आप innovation कैसे identify करेंगे?
So yeah, you have to see it based on the case that you have at hand. It cannot be, there is no thumb rule for this. There is no exact criteria that, okay, if I've done this, I've done innovation. There's no exact criteria. And a lot of times what we're also seeing is that a lot of startups which are actually doing exactly what an existing startup is doing are also getting recognized. So it's about the merit of your application. It's about how you apply for it when you, I'm talking about the again the recognition. Yeah.
सचिन जी आपकी आवाज आ रही है एक बार प्लीज
मैं बोल ही नहीं रहा.
Okay. So yeah, so innovation, there is no defined criteria for innovation. You have to see basis of the case and the merits of the case. It can be very small. Sometimes it can be a very, so we have Ola operating, we have Uber operating. When Ola came up in the Indian markets, Uber was, pretty much at a very early stage or wasn't even there in the market. But both of them are startups, even though they are doing something very similar to each other. But they have brought in some functionalities which are not there provided by Uber. Later on, Uber also adapted to that. So multiple things like that can happen. That's all part of the evolution that happens later or even at that time. But there's no exact definition. You have to see and assess that and say, so do the officers who are recognizing startups. They assess it based on the merit of that particular application.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, next question is from Nirmal sir also. What is the scope for the NGO? Some NGOs are providing the nutrition foods for the public welfare. So can they go for the startup?
If you're providing nutrition, food, and a product that you have is something which is not existing in the market, there's some kind of innovation when it comes to the structuring or the formulation or the recipe or however you're making it. There's you can patent that product for sure. That is one option available, and then you can apply for a patent. Does take a long time. Of course, a design patent usually takes around 8-9 months. Those are simplistic kind of applications, but technology patent or a process a patent usually takes around 2 to 3 years. It's a long process. So then you have to, again, you can apply for a patent. That's not a mandatory thing. It's just it's just something that you can consider if you want to protect and if you want to create that USP for yourself, where you want to create a barrier for the competitors who might copy your product. It's very easy nowadays to go ahead and do that. So it's important to get it patented. It would be suggested to get it patented. At the same time, if you want to register, you have to actually define how it's different. It's your USP which is going to differentiate and ensure and show your product as a different offering in the market. So that USP is really important in the product.
Next question is related to PPT. So I just want to share कि जो PPTs होगी Jaipur branch will upload the same on the Jaipur branch website, Bharatpur branch website, and all the respective chairmen will upload the same on the their respective branches website. Now Akash ji, please, I think you have more questions also.
Yeah, thank you, Anil ji. Ma'am, one question from Amit Khemka ji. Are startups covered under IBC?
Yes, all companies are covered in IBC. Whether it be a startup, all companies who get covered, irrespective of whether they are startup or not, if you're registered, then you get covered.
Okay. One more question from Renuka Deshpande ji. Till 10 years, it's called startup. Then after the formation of 13 years, why still Zomato is called startup?
Yeah, again, it's not recognized as a startup. That's a general term. That's why I mentioned it's very the way people address it. The media addresses it specifically, and in the layman terms. Even Flipkart, it's been more than 10 years. Or even if you look at the largest of startups, it's been more than 10 years. So they are no longer startups. They're already large corporates now. They are not startups exactly, but because when they started at that point, the startup term or it's just a way of addressing. It's not does not mean that they're legally recognized as startups. It's just a way of statement by media. Just like they call a lot of startups who are not even startups. A lot of agencies are being referred to as startups. I see that a lot. So they are not startups; they're service providers. So I mean, it's for us to understand as professionals that what really we should be addressing as startups. For laymen, it's okay if they're calling a new business as a startup without really going into details.
Right. I think that's it from the question and answer session. And at last, I would like to place my vote of thanks to Harshita ma'am, जो जिन्होंने हमारे viewers को you have really क्या technicalities होती है and what a chartered accountant should किस स्कोप में किस तरीके से वो स्टार्टअप्स की हेल्प कर सकते हैं, क्या क्या एरियाज हैं जो वो स्टार्टअप्स में अपने फाइनेंशियल एडवाइसेस दे सकते हैं. सो आई फ्रॉम द बिहाफ ऑफ एंटायर this group of chairmen place my vote of place my thanks to Harshita ma'am. And thank you very much. And I think I would also like to place a thanks to Prakash Sharma sir for initiating such a nice topic. And thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and speak.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.